Mewtwo, Pokémon Red. How fast can we beat the game? And if you want a rules refresher, just check the description. Now this is the undisputed best Pokemon in Generation 1. There's no argument to be made for anything else. And I've also done several videos over the years, but it's been about a year and a half since I last ran Mewtwo, and the goal today is to really get that benchmark for the best Generation 1 run, so I went all out. I cut every corner, counted every turn, and pretty much used everything that I've learned over the last year and a half just to really blow this one out of the water. Now just to refresh everybody, in case you've maybe lived under a Geodude your whole life, this thing has 154 special and 130 base speed. Both are elite, both are pretty much the most important stats for a solo run, especially if you're a special attacker. We do start off with Psychic, lets us hit incredibly hard, and we have Confusion just to guarantee that we'll never really run out of PP. And I think the most overlooked part is that we're gonna beat the game way before we learn any level up moves, and that's really great because we can save a lot of time just from not learning level up moves. It really adds up when you don't have to deal with that text. And there's not really many good Pokemon that can say this. Now for TMs, yes, Mewtwo gets everything good, and I think that's pretty much the end of our quick little rundown. Before we move on, I would say that I do wish Mewtwo could learn Earthquake. That's neither here nor there. Nothing really happens in the early game at all, and I think we can just quickly go ahead and move on to Brock. The biggest thing to say about this battle is that you have to use Psychic for the most part. Even a crit will not one-shot the rocks, and the only real puzzle to this early game as a whole is managing your 10 uses of Psychics to get one-shots where Confusion just falls short. Now a crit on the Onyx does mean that I can finish it off with a Confusion. It does save me a Psychic, so that's a tiny little bonus, but now we're pretty much off to the races. And first off, you might be watching this video and already be thinking, hey, why is your Mewtwo shiny? And I'm gonna be calling this run a prestige run. Basically, it means that I feel like this is the last time that I'll have to actually run this Pokemon, and making it shiny just kind of puts a little bow on it, a pink bow, if you will. Now I'm putting extra effort into this run, and I think it's just a cool way to show it. Now the last time I ran Mewtwo, like I said earlier, is about a year and a half ago, and things have changed a lot in terms of the methodology of how I route things, but also remember that the last run was no slouch. Here's the card, go ahead and look at it. It's a 0 reset, sub 1 hour, 54 minute run. It's easily the best run I've ever done just for a vanilla Gen 1 run. It was really solid until recently we start seeing Pokemon like Dugong get really close to it. And the focus today, outside of just taking us through the run, is that I'm gonna be talking about the differences and the changes that I made from that last Mewtwo run, so that we'll all come away with a better understanding how I've kind of grown in my routing process. And it'll let us kind of really see how I saved so much time today. I guess that's a spoiler, but we are going to save a lot of time today. First up is the Mount Moon candy. Now in my cross-gen runs and a lot of really elite runs, you can skip this candy because it takes a decent amount of time, and you're never going to use all 11 rare candies in a good run anyway. Now generally you want to get like 6 or 7 candies, call it a day, and all of that is to say, for no reason I guess, I'm actually going to get the candy on Mewtwo, and then from there we're going to go on the bare minimum path through Mount Moon, and this is where the first little change is going to come in as I arrive in Celadon. Before rival number 2 is the second rare candy. It's in the house, not really interesting, you're always going to get this candy, but I'm actually going to pop both of my candies here. I'm going to get to level 15 before I go into that next major battle. Now Pidgeotto's still a wild card. Now the candies doesn't really help much on it. You still have to crit and you're still gonna be open for Sand Attack. But what's really cool about Mewtwo, and something we never see really, is that if I got hit with like 10 Sand Attacks, it doesn't even matter. I could just swap over to Swift. It can't miss, but it doesn't come to that. It never comes to that. Level 15 for this fight specifically, it puts Abra from a 50-50 one-shot range to a 100%, and then Squirtle also becomes a guaranteed one hit, and that just speeds us up a couple of turns already just in this one battle. After that, you guys already know, Nugget Bridge, the route to Bill's house, it has the single highest cluster of mandatory battles, the most in the entire game. And our boy Mewtwo here, we have it on lock. All one-shots, very easy. It's also the end of the year, and I would also like to say, I'm trying to get the 20K subs. So if you have a second, and more importantly, if you like the content and you think you might keep watching, subscribe if you want more. I don't really care about sub numbers. I want like quality subs. That's neither here nor there. You kind of get what I'm saying. But outside of that, there's only one one little minor change on this route. Mewtwo does not need elixirs at all, so to save time, I'm going to be fighting this Onyx hiker here. You save a little bit of time walking, you don't have to pick up the hidden elixir, you won't have to go into your inventory later, the battle has one less Pokemon overall, so that's pretty much the reason for that. I'm also using like modified crystal sprites. We talked about it in the Giratina video, but I figured I'd at least point it out. But that's it for this little section. Let's move on to Misty. There's not much to say here, and the fight doesn't really change a ton if you don't use candies. Honestly, doesn't matter that much. The 3-shot range on Starmie is a little bit better. It gets up to like a 2/3 chance without factoring in things like crit or the special drop from Psychic, but it still takes me like 4 to get down. Not really an interesting battle, pretty quick like most battles are going to be for Mewtwo. But when we get that badge, let me talk about something that I did in like Mega Mewtwo Wise video and something that I praised Mewtwo for in other videos. Now I talked about not having to heal and how it really helped and how it was really cool in older videos, but I have to fact check myself and say honestly, it didn't really make that much of a difference. You're gonna see me heal here. I don't really care. If I'm low on HP, if I'm missing some psychics, I'll just go ahead and heal, take the few seconds it takes, and just use psychics to make up the time later. Now going back to Mega Mewtwo Y, I did a huge chunk of that run under Red Bar, and I can say that it makes a tiny bit of a difference, but I have to talk about this run, how I tested things, and how at the end of the day my conclusion is that Red Bar doesn't really matter much. I don't know if it's the faster game speed, or maybe the fact that I already play on instant text, or maybe if it's something else entirely. It's really hard to say. I originally intended this run to be like a full Red Bar route, but honestly, when you're like trying to figure out how to get there the fastest, how to stay into Red Bar, how to maintain it with the constant level ups throughout the run, it was a bit of a headache, a little bit too tedious for my blood. Also, keep in mind that Mega Mewtwo Y is weaker defensively than regular Mewtwo, so you get to Red Bar easier, and just from testing runs with and without it, I simply just had a better run without Red Bar, and I guess that's kind of like the long and the short of what I'm trying to say. On the SSN, I'm gonna get Body Slam. I think it's Mewtwo's single best way to deal with other psychic types, so it's mandatory for the run. This is also where I start to really just cut out more stuff. The original run, I did pick up the Gentleman Candy, and the thought process here is like, hey, it's really quick, one little battle, doesn't really hurt the run, you might as well get it, but remember, it also doesn't help. An important thing to keep in your mind is that an easier run doesn't equal a faster run, and there's only one thing that I care about in these runs: speed. I just want to get the fastest time. I don't want to save for run, I don't care about that. I just want the lowest in-game time at the end of the day that I can possibly get. And this is going to be about the time where Mewtwo's stats and its superior starting moves really start to kind of just catch up with it, and we start to really take over the game. I'm going to go on an absolute tear. I'm going to start to one-shot pretty much everything. Rival number 3 is no exception. We easily take him down, and then we can just move on to Surge, and it's all one-shots. I'm going to be running the table. This is pretty much how it's going to go for the rest of the game, maybe until like the last few battles. And even though we're just kind of like pummeling Surge right now, Surge is always pretty useful for at least a couple of things. So let's get past this and talk about it. So 2 things about Surge. Number 1, Thunderbolt. Great move, we already know, great coverage. Lets us take little battles like in the interim, like the Slowpokes coming up, make them one-shots. But that's pretty expected. Pretty much everybody knew that you would use Thunderbolt for like Lorelei and Lance's Gyarados, stuff like that. Let's move on to the second thing. Beating Surge also indicates that it's time for split data, and today I'm going to be going against the old Mewtwo time here, nothing surprising there. And I will say, take this with a grain of salt. That Mewtwo run and like several other runs, when you're going back that far, we're going back like 18, 19 months, they were done different, and a lot of those old runs had to be like mathematically adjusted just to be up to par with the new rules. So keep that in mind, but so far I was able to shave off about a minute off the Brock split, and it appears that maybe like using the candies, maybe like getting unlucky by losing Eternal Misty, not getting that 3-shot, we're actually dead even on that split, and I don't think I've ever like in the history of the channel had like an even split before, so that's pretty cool. But when you move it down to Vermilion, you do things like I skip Super Potions, I skip the rare candy on the SSN, I had a slight power boost from using those rare candies. It all adds up to me gaining like a minute and a half after the Surge split. So this is a really promising start, but the early game there's not much deviation, and since the game opens up so much from here on out, this is where I'm really going to start making my push to really improve Mewtwo, but we can just kind of skip past Rock Tunnel. Something I don't really talk about much at all is the underground going to Celadon. Now there's a nugget and an elixir here. They're both hidden. They don't take a ton of time, and usually if you need to, you can go ahead and get them. But I think they're a little bit tedious. They're a little bit finicky. And since we're not going to use elixirs, since we don't care about money, go ahead and just getting on your bike and just getting through here as fast as possible does save a good bit of time. And I just don't think I've ever really talked about it before. Now I'm going to talk about probably the biggest difference in like mindset and routing compared to the older video. I think nowadays the definitive and fastest way to get through the game is just to use the bag as little as possible. Don't pick up unnecessary items, know where things are in the bag, what slot they're in, and avoid vitamins if you don't need them. I do as little as possible, buy some super repels, I do pick up ice beam. But going back to that old run, this was how I used to think about it. I always thought that it was just helpful to pick up high money items in places like the Rocket Hideout, maybe in Pokemon Tower, and just buy as many vitamins as possible. But here's the truth, guys. Here's the cold, hard truth. Vitamins are not that good. I don't know who poisoned our mind. I don't know if it was J Rose who poisoned our minds by telling us that we need them, but they really only benefit struggling runs or if you need speed, because speed is the only binary stat in the game. You either have it or you don't. But I just can't stress enough how much time you can save on these runs by skipping vitamins. And I really wanted to shine a spotlight on it because I think I spent everything, held off on the buy, and did like 5 calciums in this run previously. And this is where I saved like a large chunk of time, believe it or not. So to catch us up rapid fire on a few easy sections, I blitz to the Rocket Hideout, avoid any high money items, mow down Giovanni, then I'm going to go to Erika where all of her Pokemon are just one-shots outside of the spaghetti monster Tangela, and I don't even need to get into Pokemon Tower because rival number 4, he can barely be counted as a speed bump in the road. Now, if you're wondering here, I actually had to add this little section in during post-production, go back and record this audio because I accidentally skipped over all these sections in the initial audio because they're just so quick and easy. But there you go, we're caught up. In the Safari Zone, once again, I don't pick up any vitamins, but on the last run I was picking up proteins to slightly help ranges on things like the Drowsies and Koga's gym. We'll talk about those real soon, but the percentage to one shot, it raises it such a minuscule level that it's not even worth the time investment. Next up, I'm going to Koga's gym, and this is something that I brought up. I even talked about it in the Dugong video. You can rarely one-shot these Pokemon. It's always like a puzzle, and I spent way too much time in the last video thinking about this run. It was to the point to where I almost thought about buying like 5 proteins for vitamins, picking up all the optional proteins, maybe using candies early just so I can one-shot these Pokemon. And think about it this way. Here's the real analytical way to think about it. If I were to invest all that time in picking up stuff, buying proteins, using candies, does it really outweigh me saving a few turns in battle? Like, what cost more? And I think clearly buying the proteins and doing all that setup cost more. So just getting through this battle, just taking your lumps, just accepting that it's going to be 2 shots to take out the Drowsy, that's all there is to it. Just take it as it is, and it's going to be fine. As for Koga, Psychic. We have Psychic. That's all you really need to know. Really one of the easier gym leaders. The reason why I went here now is just because it gives you some experience. And if you think about legendaries with their really high base stat totals, each and every level gives you so many stats. So the stronger we can be just helps us out later. So investing time into Koga, going ahead and getting through that mandatory juggler, it all just pays dividends at the end of the day. Next up, we're going to Silph, and I skipped the 10th floor. I only bring that up because I went to the 10th floor to go ahead and pick up the rare candy there. It just saves a lot of time. I'm saying that a lot, and I know if you've watched like recent cross-gen videos, I do that a lot whenever I'm able to. It's not really a new revelation, but compared to like 18, 19 months ago when I did that Mewtwo run, it was something that I never really fathomed in my mind. I placed too much importance on other things, so in general, the only thing I do here in Silph is I follow the straight line mandatory path, and this is where I'm actually going to learn Ice Beam. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of Confusion. I kept Confusion a lot longer in the original run. I'll talk about that a little bit later when I finally get rid of it, or when I had gotten rid of it in the original run, but I have Ice Beam now, and we can just go straight to rival number 5. And to nobody's surprise, this one is a bit of a demolition. I have the right moves and the stats just to one-shot basically everything. The only thing to really note here is that I can't quite one-shot the Alakazams. I'll never really be able to. So it's just a 2-shot. It's something that we'll come back to very, very soon in the next fight. But this one, overall, pretty easy. I'm a little bit of a broken record on that, but we make it through this fight. This is exactly what you want to see. And now, let's go ahead and just take it over to Sabrina. In the old run, I was really scared of Sabrina, a little bit too much, but the reality is that it just takes as many turns to get through Blaine as it does Sabrina, and since you already dig out into Saffron after you're done with Silph anyway, it does save a little bit time. It's the faster potential option. There's only one thing to know about this fight. There's only one win condition for you. Does your body slam do at least half of Alakazam's life? If it does, you can just get through this battle. And you're gonna see here we do like 60%. So even though it's only gonna use recover due to good AI, we're eventually gonna just outpace it. In the worst of conditions, the worst case scenario, we're just gonna outpace it. But you also have to factor in things like crits, maybe I can get the paralysis, things of that nature. So it's really not that bad. And moving this battle up just to get a little bit more experience didn't really matter. And it's just crazy how scared I was of this battle the first time around. I guess maybe the second time around. I don't even know how many times I've played Mewtwo, but we get this badge down. And now let's take a little break. But before we do that, I have to talk about the strength candy that you get from the warden. I cut it out. Usually you'll get your Lapras or your Snorlax, you'll go ahead and you'll teach it Surf Strength, and since you're in here anyway, you'll just use Strength to push the boulder, get the candy. Doesn't seem like it takes that much time, but you do save a little bit of time nonetheless. It just kind of turned out in the process of routing that I just didn't need it. The candy didn't do anything for me, so I just cut it out here. But when we're done with that, we're finally ready to dip our toes in the water, and we can take that brisk swim down to Cinnabar. We can finally take a little bit of leisure time with Mewtwo. We've been kind of burning through this game real fast. And as we get into Pokemon Mansion, something I didn't really talk about, I kind of glossed over it. I picked up Ice Beam this run. Now during the last little time period when I was doing that last Mewtwo run, I was so big on Blizzard. I still am. I think Blizzard's an incredible move, one of the best, but you have to take a look at the numbers. And for example here, if Blizzard let me one-shot something in the late game like Executor in the champion battle, maybe I would go for it. It would be worth it to me then to use, but ultimately it's going to be a two-shot whether I use Ice Beam or I use Blizzard. And in the short term, Ice Beam has helped me get rid of things like Execute multiple times. It has coverage in things like Giovanni's Gym. It has more PP, so it's more flexible. So I don't get Blizzard this run, and it's another tiny little change from the last run. And the only other thing to mention is I know Mewtwo's like a genetically cloned perfect Pokemon, and you figured that he would have some answers. So I sat down and I thought about it. Is TM28 actually
Tombstoner, brother,
or not? And Mewtwo, just like every other run that we've ever done, a little bit puzzled, doesn't know the answer. But let's take a look at Blaine. Now I want to keep it real with you guys. Out of all these runs that I've done, I played Blaine really stupid here. I don't really know what my thought process was. I wanted to save Psychic PP, so I was using Ice Beam since Fire doesn't resist Ice in Gen 1. I was using it on the weaker Pokemon. I end up getting burned, and I waste quite a few turns in this battle. Now the outcome's inevitable. I'm gonna win, but I did cost myself a little bit of time in this fight just by not using the correct move. Maybe I should have just spammed Psychic and just used whatever on the Arcanine, but since I got burned, I'm gonna have to heal anyway, so it became kind of like a moot point. So this one wasn't great, but it still didn't take a really long time, but I just wasn't happy with this overall. Probably my one little sore spot of the run. In Giovanni's Gym, there's nothing really interesting happening. I'm gonna one-shot the mandatory trainers, but it's worth talking about. This is the point to where I just now got rid of confusion on the original run. I didn't have any ice coverage until this point, and for some reason, I just like overvalued confusion's usefulness, and I held on to it for way too long. Now, confusion really is good, but you just can't hang on to something for too long. I think getting rid of it about the Silph area was the right call. And brothers, let me tell you, sometimes you just gotta know when to let go. But let's just hop into Giovanni. So you might be thinking to yourself, hey, just go straight Ice Beam, go straight Psychic, whatever you want. This battle's quick and easy, but there's some very slight nuance to this one. For example, the Nidoqueen is a little bit too tanky to go down to Ice Beam in one hit, so you gotta swap to Psychic for more effective power. And then on the Rhydon, you can't go Psychic even though it's weak special. The extra effective power from being weak to Ice Beam gives it a one-shot range. So if you just spam one move, you're gonna lose some turns. So you gotta think about it just a little bit. But at the end of the day, that's 8 badges down. We can go straight into rival number 6. And like we've grown used to at this point, Mewtwo's gonna put on a clinic. I'm gonna be getting one-shots. Now the Pidgeot does get off a quick attack, but I go on a tear. I can one-shot the first 4 Pokemon, and then the only thing to really kind of take note of to kind of like get a barometer for what the champion fight might be like is how Alakazam handles Body Slam. And it's a little bit slow, but you can see I'm still doing over 50% health. And this AI for the rival fights isn't like Sabrina's, so it won't spam only recover, so you have more of a chance. Still takes a few turns, but it looks like we'll probably be just fine during the champion fight. And at the end, we have Thunderbolt for Blastoise. Not a one-shot. Blastoise is a tanky Pokemon. This is why I always default to the Blastoise team. That, and if you have Thunderbolt, you never want to have a Gyarados in the enemy team. It's going to make it too easy. But that's pretty much it. Now let's get out of here and we can talk about a couple of things. So now we can take a look at split data again. We haven't looked at it since Surge. We had that little bitty tiny minute-and-a-half lead, and you can see that by the time we beat Giovanni, it's went up to about 7 minutes. Now I'll come back to this in a minute. You can see the Elite Four start time is 8 minutes. That's slightly skewed. I'll talk about why. But for all intents and purposes, I would say that all these little changes, everything that we've learned over this last year and a half, since the last time we done Mewtwo, it has garnered us, I'd estimate about a 7.5 minute lead, which is really good. And we are on pace to absolutely crush everything. And we'll talk about the significance of what this final time will mean. And outside of maybe fumbling a few turns in the Blaine fight, I'm really happy with this run. I even tried to do a run after this run just to see if I can maybe correct the Blaine fight and do everything else good. And I just couldn't beat this time. That's why you're watching this run specifically. But I'm very happy with this result. And let's talk about the last kind of huge difference. So here, and this is why I said the Elite Four's time is a little bit skewed, I don't use my candies until after the Elite Four start. So if you didn't know, you make it to the Indigo Plateau, there's the place to heal, you can buy items, and you go into Lorelei's room. When you cross the threshold into Lorelei's room, that is when my little programming will calculate the split time for the Elite Four start. I don't use candies till after that, and that's why I saved a little bit of time there, because I hadn't used the candies, whereas the other run used the candies. Am I over explaining? Probably. Anyway, in this run, I'm going to use 5 candies. That's going to get me up to level 48. That's where I'm going to start the Elite Four. The old run, and kind of like the old way of thinking, was that, hey, I'll save up all of my candies. I'll use 10. That's what I used in the original run, 10 candies, and I'll be, level 53, and I'll make the Elite Four much faster and be able to get the fastest time because I'm the strongest I can be at the Elite Four. The new way of thinking, the better way of thinking that saves time, that we've proven time and time again, is, hey, just skip some candies, save some time. In the case of Mewtwo here, pop a couple of candies early. You've seen it in the Dugong run as well. Pop a few candies early to make Surge a little bit easier, and you'll be just fine in the late game. Like, think about it this way. If you're just weaker throughout 90% of the game and you just hoard all your resources just to have an easier time on like the final, 10% of the game, 5% of the game, it doesn't really matter. You're making 90% of the game slower so that you can speed up 10% of the game at the very end. It doesn't make much sense, and it doesn't save you much time. So while level 48 is weaker, maybe you miss a few ranges, the time that I saved from doing everything the way I've done it up to this point, it's going to pay out dividends. And even though I'm a little bit weaker, things take a little bit longer. The time, the only thing that matters to me. Getting this final time down as low as possible. Being level 48 here is kind of like the new thing. Being level 48 going into the Elite Four, that's the new way to do things. Now, I don't want to talk too much. I already have pretty much, I guess, but that's where we're at. Same learn set, same everything. I'm not going to show me using rare candies. You know how that looks. I'm going to be level 48. And without further ado, let's take a look at the Elite Four. For Lorelei, there's not much to talk about. I have Thunderbolt. Her whole team outside of Jinx is weak to Thunderbolt, so I'm just going to spam Thunderbolt until I hit the victory. Now, her team is pretty tanky. It can take quite a few hits to take them out. The only kind of audible little option that you have to play here is when you make it to the Jinx. If you've taken some sort of growl or have your attack dropped at all, you have to just use Thunderbolt on it too, because your body slam is going to be much weaker, and that's what happens here. So I have to just Thunderbolt the Jinx a few times. Lapras is a wild card. You never know. Blizzard into a freeze, maybe body slam paralysis, confused ray like we see here. It can do some annoying things, but at the end of the day, you're going to two-shot it with Thunderbolt, and Mewtwo kind of makes very fast work of it. And believe it or not, this is probably the battle in the Elite Four that has the most thought in it outside of the champion fight. Bruno, I mean, we're not going to talk about Bruno. You know what happened. Psychic, he's dead. Agatha, same thing. Agatha's kind of like the Bruno of this run. I can just put my finger on the proverbial psychic trigger and just fire off 5 rounds into her, and that's it. I mean, she's down. High base speed means we outspeed everybody. There's no modicum of luck here, so we can just take this one out very easy and move on to Lance. Now, speaking of Lance, I've said this like a million times. Will you do good on Lance? There's 2 things. Do you have Thunderbolt? Yes. Do you have Ice Beam? Yes. That's what's going to happen. And Mewtwo being such a genetic freak that it is, that's why it's named Steiner, Scott Steiner. Look it up if you don't know. It means that I can actually outspeed the Aerodactyl naturally, which is crazy. So even though it's not much of a threat on its own, I don't even have to slow down for a single second on this fight. I can just blast through it, open up a Thunderbolt, Ice Beam my way to the end, and that's pretty much a done deal. And before we move on to the champion fight, let me just say, I was aware in this moment, I was aware that I had fumbled the Blaine fight and I wasted some time. So in order to make up that time, I did a risky play here, guys. I'm going to go straight into the rival fight. You can see here at the end of the day, my moves. At the very end of the fight, I only have 2 Psychics left, 3 Ice Beams, 5 Thunderbolts. That's all I have left. I'm not going to heal. I'm not going to use an elixir. I'm going to go straight into the champion fight and see if that can kind of make up for the lost time in the Blaine fight. And let's just see how it works out. Up first is Pidgeot. We have 2 moves to choose from here. Both are pretty much going to one-shot it. Not much to say here. We can move on to Alakazam. Now on the Alakazam, we've seen this play out many times. We'll body slam it until it goes down. What does it do on its turn? It uses Psychic. Now this could potentially have been awful because Psychic carries a 33% chance to drop our own special. And if we had our special dropped, this fight would have been much slower than it was. But thankfully, we don't get our special drop. We take it out. Now we're moving on. Rhydon, easy one-shot. Arcanine is where we're saving those 2 Psychics for. It's going to be a 2-shot range. We take it out. We are losing some health, but that's just okay. Now, the best part about being a Psychic type, it means that Exeggutor will not prioritize Hypnosis, which means that as long as we have like a nice little 2-shot range, we have 2 Ice Beams left. That looks perfect to me. We're going to take it out in 2 hits. No Hypnosis risk here. Makes it very clean. And this is basically why you don't want Blizzard, because Blizzard cannot hit a 1-shot range on this Pokemon. Now, at the end, we have more than enough Thunderbolts for Blastoise, but you're gonna see here Blastoise fires off a Blizzard here, and we're pretty low. But Mewtwo, being the Pokemon that he is, we tank this Blizzard to the face. We survive 12 health deep into the red. We fire off the winning Thunderbolt, and that, my friends, is gonna end the run. Mewtwo finishes the game with a time of 1 hour, 45 minutes, and 50 seconds. Now, just to give you some context here, I'm gonna pull up the first page of the cross-gen leaderboards. If this is your first video, I do runs with Pokemon from other generations to see if they can beat Mewtwo's time. This is the front page of that time here. Notice how there's only 1 single Pokemon that has beaten Mewtwo's time currently. That is Mewtwo itself. Mewtwo from the future, Mega Evolved, Mega Mewtwo-wise, the only Pokemon that's ever been able to beat Mewtwo. And I just showed this for context because I need you guys to know that when I say the Mewtwo bar now, how much things have dramatically shifted, I don't think there's going to be any cross-gen runs that can beat Mewtwo. Not even the infallible, one of my favorite Pokemon, favorite runs I've ever done, Alolan Ninetales. It is now behind Mewtwo. So not even Alolan Ninetales have passed the Mewtwo bar. So that means there's going to be a complete shakeup. And my main reason, without me talking too long about this, is that I wanted a real, like I wanted to sit down and do like 10 runs with Mewtwo and get the absolute top time so that I can really crank in a fine-tune like a little formula for my tier cards. And that's what I want to do. I want this run to be a 100 out of 100, and I want every single other run to be based off of this run as a 100. That's the new goal. I don't have tier cards made up just yet, but I do have a little old school kind of tier graphic. I used to use graphics like this. I think it's a little bit easier to read. Let's go ahead and pull it out. I'm pretty sure I should have already done like War Turtle by now, so some Pokemon aren't on here. And I probably add a total number of Pokemon on here, but this is like really rough draft. I just wanted to sit down and kind of throw something together, but this is how it looks. Mewtwo, in my eyes, if you have a tier list, this isn't a dig at anybody else, but this is just my kind of opinion on it. If you have a tier list and you have like 7 Pokemon on the S tier, you're lying to yourself. There's no way 7 Pokemon on the S tier. In my opinion, Mewtwo is the only S tier Pokemon. If you have more Pokemon on your S tier, that just means you haven't played Mewtwo yet. You just don't know how good it is. For example, this run with a 1:45 game time took me about 36 minutes of real life time. 36 minutes of real life time on 3x speed. Ridiculous. Very quick run to do. But this is how it shakes up. And I've also and I don't want to talk about this too much. This is only interesting if you're like hardcore into the channel and you care about the tier rankings and stuff like that. I've also tweaked the formula. So now Mewtwo's new time is the barometer for a 100 score. Now we have some other stuff that goes into the formula. There's like a denominator to divide stuff and we subtract stuff. But now resets are going to work a little bit different. Used to, the first 2 resets don't count. And if you have a resetless run, you get a tiny little bonus. The bonus is now gone and resets now scale, meaning the more resets you have, the more penalty you have to your time. So at the end of the day, you can just do a quick look. Charizard is down a little bit lower because it didn't get a perfect bonus. I think that was a bad call, but we live and we learn and we kind of tweak stuff and improve things. And I think this is the improved version. So you can see that now from Cloyster down to like Dodrio, those Pokemon used to be in the A tier. And if you're comparing them to a 1:45 Mewtwo time, they would now be pushed down into the B tier. Now this means that I have the potential, seeing how much this run improved, I could probably improve some of these other runs a lot too. So that's something we'll think about in the future. But for now, this is kind of how it looks. I'm still doing the tier cards, but let's be real guys, once you start getting up to like 6 pages of tier cards, it takes like 2 minutes at the end of a video for it to kind of scroll past. And this is just one graphic, really easy to see. But just the main thing to know, Mewtwo is 100 out of 100, and going forward, this is how everything's gonna look. This is how everything's gonna be formatted. Let me know what you think about it. If you made it this far, you're a real one. I really do appreciate it. A lot of talking at the end here. I don't like to do that. The whole point of a graphic like this is to be able to talk, get my points out and just move on real quick and end the video, but I didn't do that this time. Something I can work on in 2025. Special shout out to my channel members and Patreons. I really do appreciate the support. Hopefully 2025 is a little bit better, and I want everybody to have a good little start into the new year. Have the best year of your life next year, and that's about all I got for you. I got a lot of ideas. Hopefully I can find time to make a lot of those ideas reality, but that's about it for me. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.